Hey guys, it's Brigitte with San Diego Seed Company, and I'm super excited because we finally have dahlia bulbs. I'm so excited. This has been a long time coming. I'm a big fan of dahlia flowers. They're beautiful. They just are really an awesome and pretty easy to grow flower, even though they seem kind of like you have to be an expert grower. You don't. And I'm going to go over everything you need to know to easily grow dahlias in your garden, in pots, in raised beds, or directly into the soil. And I'm specifically going to talk about what you need to know to grow these in zone 9 and 10. Now, before I get into that, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button so you're notified anytime we put out a video. So, I have been searching for dahlia bulbs for a long time that we can have as a company and sell. We've grown dahlias here at the farm, and the first couple seasons I grew them, I made total rookie mistakes. I'm gonna save you from doing that. And I also wanna let you know that they're relatively easy to grow. So what is a dahlia bulb or a tuber? There's a lot of different terms that people can use. Well, when you buy them from us, they're gonna come in this very boring packaging. We put them in this packaging because once we get them, we need to get them to you as soon as possible because they are a live perishable product, okay? So no fancy packaging, which is fine. You don't need it anyways. And what you're gonna get is actually a couple of different things. So when you're looking at this is basically a clump, okay? And there's several different things here when we're talking about the different parts, the anatomy of this plant. So these are the tubers, okay? And think of them just like potatoes, actually. In fact, dahlias I'm not gonna tell you to eat them, but they can be edible, and wild dahlias bulbs the tubers are actually eaten. Pretty interesting. So think of it like a potato. It's basically the energy storage for the dahlia itself. So that's one part, and this is typically when people say tuber, this is what they mean. And you can actually buy dahlia tubers where it's just the tuber divided and you can start the plant from that. We don't do it that way because I want to give my growers a whole clump so you have the most likelihood of success. You've got lots of different energy storage on this clump to make sure that it'll sprout. The next important part here is what we call the neck, and this is up here. So basically, the energy is pulled from the tubers, just like a potato, and it's pulled up into the neck. And you can see this is where it was grown in previous years, and then it was pulled up and it was cut, and this is what we're looking at here, okay? Now, the reason why they're planted from this is because in other climates, they're typically planted, and think of it kind of like a tulip bulb. They're planted and then they're actually pulled up out of the ground and then they're stored and then planted back out. The beauty of zone 9 and 10, people, is that we don't have to do that. I'm not gonna dig mine up. You can dig them up to divide them if you want to, and you actually can increase your stock of dahlia tubers or bulbs. But I don't typically do that because we just get lots of blooms every single year. It's easy, it's beautiful. So when you get them from us, you're gonna pull them out of the bag, and you're gonna have this really funny looking thing. Keep in mind that it is a live product, which means I can't control how they look. And actually, let's peek at another one here. I'd like to see the same variety. So maybe, do I have another one? Yes, okay, so let's look at exact same variety, different bag. Let's see how different they look. Oh yeah, look at this. Huge difference, right? Now, a lot of people might be concerned like, oh, is this one better? Or maybe this one's better because it has more tubers on it. Or maybe it's not because it has a tuber that got sliced in half. Or sometimes what will happen is you'll have an extra tuber that falls off and is in the bag. Both totally viable, ready to plant in the ground. And this is just, again, a natural product. So they look very different. Now, so you get these, you buy them from us or wherever you get them, they're a live product, they should be planted right away. A couple things to know about dahlias. Dahlias are not frost sensitive, okay? So they need to be planted after the last frost. And they don't really like extreme heat, okay? Now obviously living in zone 9 and 10, man, we've had some extreme heat, but they still grow really well here. But if you're in an area that gets a lot of heat, think shade cloth. Shade cloth is key. If you're in a coastal community, you probably won't need it and your temperatures will be fabulous. These guys like to grow spring through summer. They're prolific bloomers and you'll get blooms all the way well into fall. They're relatively easy to grow and you can plant them in pots, raised beds, or directly in the ground. I'm gonna do some in pots because I like to move them around my patio when they're blooming and be able to see the blooms from inside my house. And I just like the way they look in pots. I also plant them directly into the soil, in ground in the garden, and I just leave them. And they just grow year after year. They're relatively easy. I get lots of blooms, pollinators love them, so on. So let's talk about actually planting them. So I've got a variety here, Vic Jessie, okay? And I've got a nice sized pot. This pot is probably a little bit of an overkill, but one of the reasons why I love big pots is because in our climate, especially because I want to put this pot on the patio where it's hardscaping, it's going to get very hot. And that means it's going to dry out quicker. So the bigger the pot I have, the bigger the sponge I have to ensure that I have some time in between waterings before they dry out. So in a pot this size, I'm not going to put more than 2 clumps. And really 1 clump is all that you need. But I'm going to put 2 just because I've got them. Now, when these come out of the bag, I don't recommend, when you get a clump from us, that you split them before planting. Why? Because you want the neck to be intact, because if the neck becomes not connected to the tubers, it can't get the energy, and then you can't get the buds to form and then the actual plant to grow. This is one complete kit. This is what you're going to want to plant. The next year, more tubers will grow and you'll have more plants, and then you can divide at that time if you want. But first year, get your goodies, put them in the ground. Don't worry about splitting them up. Make sure that you leave all these intact and plant them. I've got a pot here. I had just some stuff growing in here. We want to take all of this out, and I want to make sure there's nothing competing with my dahlias, okay? And something to consider is dahlias are a little finicky in the sense that they don't want to be totally dry, obviously, but they also are very prone to rot. So if you're growing these, let's say, I don't know, up in Washington, you would want to be very careful about the way you water and the frequency that you water, because you don't want these guys to rot out. I'm down here in Southern California, and we've had a very wet winter. This pot's pretty dry, so I'm going to plant these, I'm going to water, and then I'm actually going to wait and see that they're actually budding before I water again. I'm also going to use that method because it's supposed to be kind of cloudy and cool for the next week or two, so I don't need to oversaturate them. There is a method where you can actually take these and start these in a tray beforehand and then plant them in ground. I don't recommend doing that because you don't need to in zone 9 and 10 because we have such a long growing season. That's really meant for areas of the United States where it's a short growing season. You want to get them up and going as quick as possible and gain a couple weeks in your growing time. So I'm going to break up my soil here, get all this junk out of here. Now, as you can tell, this is very dry. So I'm actually going to want to water and also to start rehydrating the soil. We want to get that guy out of there, which brings up a really good point. One of the main things that is a issue with dahlias is that they're basically slug and snail candy, okay? Luckily for you, there's a very easy fix. After you plant them, you can treat the top of the soil with Sluggo Plus, and that's really gonna make a big difference in keeping the numbers down. And then also, if you have them in pots, you can just hand pick these guys off and know that they're gonna be a problem, so stay on top of it. Okay, I need to get water. It's around front, let me grab it. All right, so I'm just watering in the soil here because the soil's pretty dry. And I want to rehydrate this soil right off the bat, okay? Now again, I don't want it saturated, and since we know that dahlias are prone to rotting, I don't want this soil to be really heavy and full of tons and tons of clay, or even too much compost can be a problem. I mean, wow, when have I ever said that? Too much compost is a problem? I don't think I've ever said that before. But in this particular case, it really could be, because if this soil was so heavy that it held a lot of water, then they could potentially rot. So you notice in this mix, I've got a lot of perlite, and that's to help keep it really aerated. So if you've got something on hand, like even maybe you have half a bag of a succulent mix, you could mix it in here, because the succulent mix is going to lead to significant drainage, which means it's not going to stay wet for as long. So that's about the gist of it. I'm not going to go really deep because I know this is good quality soil. I've planted in here many times. And the dahlia roots are really gonna do a good job of going down in there. Let's assume you've never seen one of these before. Tubers go down, stem goes up. Very important. You don't want to plant it sideways, and you definitely don't want to plant it upside down. That's not going to work. So you want to plant it like this, and you really only want maybe an inch or two of soil on top of the stem. Putting it a foot down is really going to be problematic, and you're more likely to have issues when the main stem starts to bud and eye out and start to grow. So since I know I'm putting 2 in here, I'm gonna put this guy more or less right side up, see? And then I'm just gonna cover him into place. Really, that's it. It's like a potato in the sense that you're burying it into the ground, and that the plant matter is going to grow out from underneath the ground. So what you wouldn't want to do is plant this really shallow and have the stem sticking out like that. There's no reason to do that. You're going to want to bury the whole thing. That's about the gist of it. What I'm going to do here is give this a quick little watering in. Now you'll notice as I watered it in, look what happened. You could actually see the stem. So I want to make sure that a little bit more soil goes on top of that, okay? You don't want to be able to see the stem. You know where you planted them. One of my favorite things to do is make sure I put a marker right next to it so that I can guarantee that I know where it is and I know where to look for the plant when it starts to sprout. So the next thing that's really important that you gotta think about, especially if you're growing dahlias for cutting or making arrangements, which most people use them for, you need support. These tend to grow really tall, really lanky, and the very big blooms on the end mean that it's very likely that the plant can snap. Now don't make the mistake that I've totally made before, where I plant my dahlia bulbs and then I watch them sprout, and then I go in with the stake later and I stick it in the ground and I actually pierce one of the tubers, and I really am damaging and taking away energy from the plant. So what I recommend that you do is, I planted mine now. I'm actually gonna put stakes around the outside of this pot where I know that the clumps are not, so that I can ensure that they have something basically to grow into. You will need staking no matter what variety you grow if you want big, beautiful blooms. Now, what kind of stake are you to use? Well, that kind of depends on the variety. Every variety has different growing requirements. You'll want to look them up and see, does it get 3 feet tall? Does it get 6 feet tall? Because that's going to determine what size of stake that you want. But bear in mind, a little tiny stick, like, a popsicle stick, is not going to do it. You're gonna wanna use either a piece of bamboo, a wooden stake, or even you can use PVC or EMT, which you can use to make a staking system. I don't recommend using tomato cages. I actually hate them. I don't recommend using them for anything except actually nothing. I cannot think of one thing that you wanna use a tomato cage for, because they don't work really well. The nice thing about using individual stakes is you can stake the individual stalk if you want, or you can actually put like 2 T-posts at the end of a row, and then you can run string and keep them up. Professional flower growers actually use that method so that they can continue to string them up throughout the season and keep them up off the ground. Okay, so what do we have this year? So we've got a couple of very popular varieties. Cafe au lait, one of the most popular varieties for florists and cut flowers, beautiful creamy flower. We also have the Vic Hesse, which is what I planted today. Absolutely beautiful. We got the Martha, Babylon Pars, My Love, which is really awesome, and then Melody Harmony. We're only carrying 6 varieties this year, and these are 6 varieties that I really love, that have grown, that do really well. They range in the size of their blooms and the size of the plant. You'll want to look at that information. I recommend that you grow them all, find out which one you love. Do not wait until the fall to plant these, because with the threat of cold temperatures throughout the winter, they may not overwinter very well. In fact, if you're in a particularly cold part of zone 9 and 10, I recommend that after the plant has died back, you leave the bulbs in the ground, and then you put a heavy layer of mulch on top, and that keeps the temperatures in and is gonna protect them so they can re-sprout the following year. Now again, live product. So you want to get these while we have them. We only carry a few of them. for a very short period of time. It's what we've got. Once we run out, we're done. So if you haven't grown dahlias before, do it. It's really fun. It's absolutely amazing. And who knows, you might, end up becoming a cut flower farmer. There's worse things to be.